Warning, the Stone Age Gamer includes a lot of bad language. Cover your mother***ing ears.
Good evening and welcome to episode 190 of the Stone Age Gamer podcast for the week of February 23rd, 2018. I am Kris Randazzo, and joining me tonight is bearded banjo novice Dan Ryan.
Novice is even a bit generous.
And special guest bearded banjo master, Banjo Guy Ollie.
How are you doing, boys?
I'm good. I'm taking a gamble that you still have a beard, right?
I still have a beard.
Okay,
this has
good.
been far too long since the last time we did this, isn't it?
It really has.
It really has. He's here to close out our Creators Month, and we've got lots of fun stuff to talk to him about. Before we go any further, here is your weekly reminder that you can email us at mail@geekade.com. Just include the word Stone Age Gamer in the subject line. You can let us know what you think of our show, what topics you would like us to discuss in the future, or just say hello, because we always want to hear from you, the listener. So, I looked it up, and the last time Ollie was here was episode 39, way back in March of 2015. So it's been just about 3 years since you were on the show, Ollie.
Wow, what episode are we at now?
190.
Oh boy. Didn't say we'd do this again, like, a couple of months after the episode was on.
We did.
I think we've been saying it every couple of months since the last time you were on. It's time differences are fun. So what have you been doing for the last 3 years?
So tell us everything.
I've been doing exactly the same stuff I was doing last time I was here. Music, painting, doing stuff around the house, working away. Just being me, really. More of the same is my answer.
I gotta say, your houseworking stuff makes me wish that I could fly you out here to help me, because I'm working on my basement, and I have this cool idea that I want to. So my daughter Ellie is the juggernaut, and she destroys anything that is physical media, and so I want my game collection in my basement set up, and obviously I'm gonna wait till she's older to put most of it on shelves. But I have these ducts, in that I have a finished basement, and so I have these these one place where these support beams go, and then the other place that's like an air conditioning duct that I want to attach shelves to that are on the ceiling, so that I can line up games up there, which is completely out of her reach. But I am not savvy enough to do that.
You want to attach shelves to a duct? Well,
they're covered in sheetrock. They're the ducts are inside this structure. There's already stuff hanging on them. There's from when we moved in, they have speakers on them and stuff like that.
You can make a floating case around it. Is this going to be a DIY podcast?
Yes.
So you make a floating case around it, whole structure, and then
I have lots.
This
of
is
thoughts.
Basically Chris's desperate attempt to become a man. Please, somebody help me.
Hey, I changed several light bulbs in here all by myself.
Have you grown a beard yet?
I have grown a beard, yes.
Okay, well, there you go. You're halfway there. That's all it
Pretty
takes,
much,
really.
If I go get the wood, it'll all just come to me because I have a beard now, right?
Yes.
Just grow a beard and be grumpy, and then that's it.
Well, it's half done already. All right, cool. I feel good. Podcast over. Thanks for joining us. All right, so let's see. I had a handful of questions for you, but I guess just in case anybody, I would assume we have at least 4 or 5 new listeners since episode 39.
At least.
At least. So what is it exactly that you do? Explain to the world who you are and what it is that you do. Primarily your awesome YouTube stuff.
Yeah, so I cover video game music like a lot of VGM artists on YouTube, but I try to use almost exclusively the banjo and mandolin and other acoustic instruments. But that's really the elevator pitch for what I do. It's essentially acoustic covers with a predominance of banjo and mandolin. I see it as a problem-solving exercise. That's what I do. There's a lot of people that do covers on YouTube. I just try to stay away from electric guitars and keyboards.
I mean, you do a lot of obviously earlier on, and even still occasionally you do music that you would expect people to cover, but you also you hit some awesome tracks. I think your last 2 were Speedball 2, which I'm not even familiar with, and Zillion for Master System, which was awesome.
Yeah, these are well, there's a lot of people doing Nintendo stuff, Nintendo covers, Nintendo game, and JRPG like predominantly. So it's it just first, these are not the systems and the games that I would be super familiar with. I know I have some Nintendo experience, but and not that much. So all these covers that I do are really game that I've played or that I've experienced somehow. So you'll find a lot of stuff from the Amiga, the Sega Master System, a lot of PC stuff as well.
I love the Master System stuff because the Master System in particular has such a strange, chirpy sound chip, and hearing Master System music redone is always a super treat, and it's just not something that happens that often.
Yeah, a lot of the PSG for the Sega Master System just didn't do these tunes any favors really, even for Wonder Boy 3. And they're still very enjoyable, but it's not something you'd listen to in the car. You could easily listen to NES chiptune, like it stands on its own, but Master System stuff, it gets a bit even too rough for me.
A handful of tracks that I do actually listen to in the car, but not many. Like I'll listen to a couple of songs from Wonder Boy. I will listen to the Psycho Fox song, the one that you covered. Actually, a lot of the Psycho Fox I think stands up pretty well.
Yeah,
for some reason, it's not as abrasive, but like. Every now and then I like to have on my playlist like Fantasy Zone just because I love that tune and I learned it on Master System, but I usually will skip the track by the time it's over because I just can't keep listening to it, especially when I have the arcade version to listen to, which is so good. But
yeah, it's not an easy system to just listen to willingly, really.
Not so much.
The Amiga was much easier. Like it was a synthesizer in a way, the Amiga, so there was a lot of sampling, so you could actually listen to soundtracks of Amiga stuff just on its own, and it probably doesn't need covers in that sense. But the Master System, there's a dire need for more artists to cover stuff from the Master System, because there's some very legitimate tunes there, some very, very good tunes that just seem to have been forgotten, in favor of NES stuff. It's a shame. It's a good system.
It is. It's a very good. I mean, Dan has a big history with Master System.
Yeah, I do. I love it. And there, like you said, it is interesting to listen to the music there, because now, like, as a kid, when you're playing through it, like, everything was cool. It was like, oh, this is cool. It sounds good, whatever. And now, like, as an adult, you're like, oh, man, that sounds awful. But, like, I can hear in the music itself, like, I know that there's some talent in there. Like, and if somebody could,
if it was just on different instruments.
It. Yeah,
if it didn't sound like somebody was punching a bird, it would be great.
It would be fantastic. And I agree entirely, man. Like I would love to see more people covering like Master System stuff. But that probably goes to speak to now. I could be completely talking out of my ass here, as per usual. But like the proliferation of video game covers, like in YouTube and whatnot, is maybe a combination of a couple things. Like there's a lot of people in America that are doing it, and a lot of the bigger names in America are more familiar with Nintendo stuff. Therefore, when copycat stuff comes out, and I don't say copycat as like, oh, you're a copier, but like that's what we all do. It's like, ooh, that's what's popular, so that's what I'm going to do. And it just kind of exacerbates that problem of this other stuff not getting popularized.
I would agree, yeah. There's a lot of, the vast majority of YouTubers are from the States. I mean, I don't have the official statistics from that, but that's the, as English speakers, that's the type of channels we follow. So most of them are from the States. Like, I'm looking at my subscription tab here. It's all, there's a few English ones, but most of them are from the States. So, yeah, so you'll find a predominance of just Nintendo material being covered, and very, very little, if any, in fact, Master System stuff. You'll find Sega stuff in the sense, you'll get arcade stuff or even Genesis,
Sonic.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's pretty much the only thing you'd see from Sega. Whereas, the Master System had some great soundtrack, like even Midnight Resistance, like the whole soundtrack for that is just awesome.
And even some of the Master System ports of Genesis games, like, I mean, listening to the Master System version of the Streets of Rage soundtrack is like Man, that's pretty impressive for coming out of a Master System and transposing that incredible Genesis stuff or Mega Drive stuff into the Master System. Pretty darn impressive.
I have plans to do covers of Streets of Rage.
Yes,
Nice. That's awesome.
I just don't know how I'll do it, but
But one day, I plan it. You like Chris's floating shelves. He has plans. It's
got plans.
no idea how it's going to happen.
you got a beard, you're halfway there. Right?
yeah, there you go.
So to what we were just talking about there. So I know that obviously YouTube views have something to do with like the songs that you choose, right? Do you ever choose things based on like what do you think is going to be successful on YouTube? And like when you do something like Zillion and it doesn't get as many views as I don't know, like I'm just looking at like, all right, so Zillion has 1.2 thousand views, which is awesome. But then I look at Castlevania Stalker and it's got 6.1 thousand views. So like, does that kind of stuff factor into what songs you're going to choose to cover next, or do you just I guess follow your heart?
Yeah, no, I never factor in views or popularity for covers. I really don't. Like, it's easy to say, but I really don't. I get upset and I give out once I release them and nobody's watching them. But I make the same mistake all the time. Something comes in my head. That's really how it works. Like a game I played or something I saw or heard in friends, and then I have to cover it. That's really the main driver of how I choose these covers. And so it views what's going to be popular. No, I wouldn't be covering these games if that was my the motivation behind doing these covers. So it's really it's really what I want to do on the moment. Like, Kris, you're a contributor on Patreon. Like, and I always say, like, I have sort of a plan. Like, I have a list of 2-3 tunes that I'm going to do ahead. But how many times have I got? Okay, no, just forget that. I'm just going to do these two instead, and then maybe I'll catch up with the plan like in 2 months once I'm done with these. But they just came up, and I have to do them now. Like, it happens every month or two.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what happens. That's really, they pop in my head. I remember them, or somebody suggests them. I listen to them, and now they're in my head. I can't get them out. So that's the way I have to exercise them. It's a mess up there. It's just, so that's the only way they can get out. I have to do them.
So were you recently playing Journey to Silius? Did somebody like how did the Silius one come out? I'm curious.
Yeah, I was playing it on an emulator, and then.
That's a cool game.
I knew I'd been thinking about doing it at some point anyway, but then I'd been playing it for a while, like briefly for about 2 hours, But then I was like, geez, the soundtrack is actually pretty good.
Is that a game I played Kodaka? Before. I don't remember.
I don't know. I actually don't know. But yeah, so it stuck. I mean, now it's in my head.
It is Kodaka. Awesome.
Yeah, I have to get it out, so there you go. And I have another one coming. I've done, like, how many? Two? How many have I done? I've done 2. I have another one coming, anyway. I did them all in a row, like, so.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm just always thrilled when when a new one comes out, and then I'll listen to it, and then I'll get distracted by something else, and then I'll just wait for them to show up in my, the Bandcamp, Patreon. How do you get the MP3s to us again? I don't even remember. I just got an email about it the other day. So I got 2 from you from Bandcamp. I haven't downloaded them yet. It was the Uncontrolled Experiment and Zillion. Got it. I should download those.
Oh yeah, that was a composition. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's see. Some of the other stuff you do on YouTube. You do MSX Mansion, which I think is super cool. How is MSX Mansion going?
Not great. I don't have time to do a lot with the other channel, unfortunately. So I'd love to do proper reviews. That's kind of how I had started the MSX Mention. Like, it was almost proper reviews, but with a script and everything. And just I run out of time. It's really hard to do 2 channels. To do a review channel. Reviews take a lot of time, and then and to do the covers as well. So. I'm still just doing sort of casual overviews of MSX stuff.
Didn't you like get a box from somebody of like random discs, and you were just like, all right, let's see what this one is, right?
That was the Amiga disc.
Oh, it was Amiga.
That's
Okay,
right, yeah.
That was fun.
Yeah, I got a random box of just Amiga demos, and it was just I kind of started just going through them one after the other to see what was on them. And that other channel, it is I'm not taking very seriously if I'm to be honest. So it's just whatever I have time for, and I have the camera switched on at the time goes on. I think I even got holiday footage on there at some point. So yeah.
So where's
but
Simon?
If I had more time, exactly. I was going to mention Simon. If I had more time, Simon is probably the guy I'd resurrect. But again, Simon, you need to write scripts, find time for inspiration and all that. I'm just doing too much, man, between the music and the painting, and then I started teaching judo as well, and obviously work, and my wife, and time is becoming an issue. Yeah.
So what I'm hearing is that you're not trying hard enough, Ollie. That's what I'm hearing.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Okay, all right, that's fair. Because we're not either. Don't get me wrong. That's not a judgment. I mean, we're always like, oh, we should do this, and we're like, yeah, totally, that's a great idea, and then it never happens.
I took an evening, when was it, Monday, to play the PlayStation 4, and realized I hadn't switched it on in 3 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what have you
have time to play?
What have you been playing? I know you just said you haven't been playing much, but it's been 3 years. What have you been playing?
What have I been playing since? Let me check. I got sent a lot of games on Steam to review for the other channel as well. That was cool. So just a little outburst of very small games. What have I been playing? Horizon Zero Dawn. Actually, I spent a lot of time
so
clearing
good.
That. Yeah,
so good.
Yeah.
That's the one that we keep telling Kris, like, when you get a PS4, this will be the thing that is like, this is the game for you on PS4. Like, God of War is coming out and it's going to be great, and Fighter Z is amazing, and Shadow of the Colossus remake is great, and all those things, but Horizon Zero Dawn will be like, oh shit, this is why I needed this.
And they keep telling me like I need convincing. Like
it's such
I want a PS4 and Horizon. I want it.
Do you know it's one of those games that before I played that, like Red Dead Redemption was probably my favorite game. Mm-hmm. Because it was so just refreshing and novel and different to my experience of open worlds in general, and I'd say Horizon Zero Dawn is very much up there as well. It's just because everybody recommends, The Witcher or all these types of RPG, but they're, after a while, sort of fantasy RPGs are just various iteration of the same idea, with better gameplay or better story, but it's, sort of the experience blends into each other. But Horizon Zero Dawn just stood out for me, like as just the storyline and the world itself was just so refreshing and novel. It's probably my favorite game at the moment, I have to say. I'm
jealous.
You should.
I mean, I am, but I'm not. Like I'm steeped in so many games right now. Like Dan and I are going to do an episode, not next week, but the week after, about just what we've been playing, because we've been playing so darn much, and I just bought Bayonetta last night. The day before I bought Zeo Drifter, and a few days before I bought Dandara. Like I'm steeped right now. I wouldn't have time for anything if it was in front of me. But
yeah, I think the spirit of collecting can be counterproductive as well after a while for games, because you stop experiencing a game fully, and you just want to play the next one every time. So you either rush through a game or just half play it, or I'd be the opposite. I'd literally spend 2 months on one game and look at every asset, every corner, every little flower and tree. Like I'm an explorer in the game, so it takes me forever to finish anything.
I am attempting to do that. Is kind of my thing. Is I'm trying to finish games before I move on to the next one. But there was just this flurry of releases of things like, wow, I really, really want to have that. Even if I don't play it right away, I want to get it because I want to support it. Like Jules Watson's stuff, the Atui stuff. I'm so on board, and Zeo Drifter was only $10 and I loved that game. So like I'm probably not going to play through most of it now. I want to finish Dandara. Like I finished Celeste before that. But yeah, I got work to do on this Bayonetta thing. That's 2 games.
It's a fun game, yeah.
Oh my god, it's bonkers. It's so bonkers. And I haven't even touched the second one. I just started the first one because I've never played either of them before. And we'll talk about that another time. Games coming out that I'm super excited about. Probably one of the games I'm most excited about this year is Monster Boy. Now, where are you with that? I know long ago, back in like 50 years ago when they announced this thing, you were involved in it in some way, right? Like you have music in the game. Where is it now? What's the story there?
So I'm involved and I'm not. But what happened is, so back in, was it 2014, early days of the channel, I was approached by FDG Entertainment, who said, "Can we use your cover of the Monster Village for our announcement, because we are releasing a Wonder Boy clone of sort." So I said, "Yeah, absolutely." So they did that, and they did a video. It was me playing and some early screenshots of the game, and as we started talking, I said, "Look, if you have any other announcements or anything like that, I'm going to be making more covers of that game. So if you want them, you're welcome to them." I said, for free. They had paid me for using the first cover, but I said, I'm a fan of the project and the game, the original game, so feel free to use any of those covers. And this, so that was fine and dandy. And they came back to me and said, "Well, look how about we put them in the game in some fashion? So we have musicians already. They already have the theme reworked and recording, but we can find a way to have your music in the game if you want." So I was like, "Yes." And
yes, I want. Definitely,
yeah.
definitely want.
And then I can say that now because I released they send me demos regularly, so I get to play whatever new stable demo they have, and they allowed me to put footage of the last demo, the Switch demo, running on a PC, but it'll be the Switch demo on my other YouTube channel a while back, and in it, very early on in the game, you'll find a small. It's an otter at the moment. It'll be a dog in the final version, with a banjo called Ollie, who's missing his music sheet. And so you can put one and one together. You'll have to find the music sheets, collectibles.
How very Shovel Knight.
100, yeah, exactly. 100% the game. It'll become essential to get these, and they'll unlock the musics in the game as well. So. So I'll be in some fashion in the game and involved in the game. It just happens to be stuff I would have done anyway, and but I told them they were more than free to use for the game. So there you go. So I still have to finish a few. I have to redo the early ones, the Monster Village and the ones I have on the channel at the moment. I'll redo them so they come more in line with the last ones I did for them.
Oh boy, I can't wait to hear a newer version of that. I mean, your side crawler dances.
Yeah,
so
my plan
good.
for it when it comes out is to have a full album as well of all the Wonder Boy 3 stuff, as featured in Monster Boy, and then to do a full at least month or two of just Wonder Boy 3 covers.
Oh boy, that's something to look forward to. That's awesome.
That's fantastic, man.
Yeah.
That's so cool. Like that has to be such like I think vindicated is not the right word, but like I don't know.
It's a dream I never had that came true.
Yeah, there you go. That's a really good way to put it.
It's a dream I never had that came true. Yeah, it's Fiona, my wife, always is like, "Oh, you must be, you must feel so proud." And I'm like, "Yeah, I still don't realize. Like, I'll have to see it, because I still haven't seen how they'll be used or heard them in the game. Like, but yeah, at the same time, I'm very, very elated about the whole project. And they're super friendly, super enthusiastic about my stuff. Like, I think they bought one of my painting at some point, and then they sent me a PS4 so I could review or play the game. when it comes out. You know, they've been just super nice and very friendly, and nothing was ever a problem. You know.
Have you painted any Wonder Boy stuff?
I have. That's not what I bought. I can't remember what. It was one of the developers. I think bought something from Monster by Tree for the office, and I have painting one piece, a couple of pieces from Wonder by Tree. Yeah, it's on the other channel as well. Which, by the way, I'm actually gonna bring all these videos on the music channel, because I just want that just for art in general. So not just music, or not just covers, but composition as well, experiments and some painting as well.
Yeah, I see no problem with that. So, I mean, I'm branching off at a bunch of different questions in my head, but what can you tell us about Monster Boy? Like, can you tell me more about the game? Have you seen any of the new animations in the game yet? Because I know they just redrew everything, and I'm itching to see what that looks like.
I have not seen the new animation. The last one I'd have to look on the channel, but yeah, it's when they were at the that German big conference.
I remember watching the videos of that.
Or was it, were they at the E3, or I can't remember. Anyway, but that's the last demo I got. I got 3 altogether, and I haven't seen the new animation, no. But it looks superb. It's very, very pretty, very colorful, very, very Sega in the way I saw it as a kid. You know,
that's
like awesome. All the background and the colors, and yeah.
That I
Super
think may be
about it.
One of my favorite things about the age that we all are now, playing the games on the technology that's currently available, is that stuff finally looks like what I had convinced myself it looked like as a kid.
Yeah. You know, and sounds like it as well. Yeah.
And sounds like it as well. Like it's finally, the technology is finally caught up to our imaginations. You know, like playing through Fighter Z is, you know, it's the cartoon. Like, it is the Dragon Ball cartoon, and it's what I had convinced myself, you know, the old PlayStation games or whatever console it was on had looked like, but no, they really didn't. You know, and it's just, it's this unbelievable thing that, you know, younger kids are not as fully appreciative of that aspect of it, because it looks like it always has looked to them. And you know, it's interesting to me, and I don't really know where I'm going with this. It's still very early and I haven't had enough to drink, but you know, like it's interesting to me how we can have these experiences now that mean 2 very different things for 2 distinct groups of people, yet we can still enjoy it just as much. Yeah,
it's something I often wonder, actually, with the new generation of younger gamers, is because, like you said at the time, that's the way we saw it, but our imagination filled a lot of the gaps. And you know, you had the manual, you had the cover art, you had all of that, and you just applied the sort of implicit texturing in your mind over what you were seeing on the screen. So that background was just all white or all black. You know, it was a deep space, or it was a beautiful seascape or something like that. So you did that in your mind, and just, I think that added some value to the game. It just added to your personal experience, and you were probably making the games bigger than they actually were. But I don't know how that relationship works nowadays, because everything is there and served. You know, everything is on display. So I'm not sure how the younger generation's imagination is or works now. Because I don't have the reference point that I had, you know, back then, and then there's no work required of them, you know, to appreciate. I don't know. Maybe I'm entirely wrong. It's interesting. I'm not sure how their experience is. I'm sure it's fantastic. It's just, it feels like it's lacking their part, you know.
Well, I mean, that also depends on what they're playing, because you also have today so many people are making pixel games. You know, I was just talking about Celeste, you know, that's the same kind of a situation. It's like, obviously they do look better because there's more animation and visual effects, but like there's so many pixel art games out there. Heck, even Xeodrifter, you know, like
that's true. Yeah. That's
so
true.
there are those. I'm fascinated by, like, I wonder if if a kid is going to play Celeste the way I played Super Metroid, and then someday somebody's going to do what Lizard Cube did to Wonder Boy 3 to that game, you know, because Wonder Boy 3, my son adored watching me play through that game, but he wasn't all that into when I tried showing him the Master System version, and he just wasn't really all that into it, and I showed him the new one. He was just amazed. And then as we were playing it, he really liked it when I switched back and forth. He'd be like, show me the old one, show me the new one, I'll switch back to the new music. And that kind of stuff was really cool. But kind of branching off what Dan's point was.
How good was that remake, though?
Oh my God, it was amazing. And how we live in a time where that kind of stuff is possible. That Master System game that is a masterpiece, really, and seeing somebody put that kind of art direction on top of it. I wrote an article on Stone Age Gamer's blog about other games I wished that Lizard Cube would tack that onto, because I remember when Super Mario All-Stars came out, like, that was so incredible to me, because the originals, like, obviously the leap from Mario 3 to Super Mario All-Stars wasn't huge, but looking at the reimaginings of Super Mario 1 in particular, where Mario actually looks like Mario instead of this 8-bit sprite, that was so fascinating to me, like looking at every facet of it, like what the castles look like now, instead of just this repeated block of bricks. Now they have texture and stuff to it, and it kind of made that world so much more, not real because it's the freaking Mushroom Kingdom, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And this kind of a remake of something like Wonder Boy just brings it totally modern. It plays almost identical, because there really wasn't anything wrong with the way it played. Not that there's anything, I guess, specifically wrong with the way it looked, but bringing it into something so beautiful and so modern. DuckTales Remastered is another great look at doing something like that. I want to see more of that. And as much as I know folks kind of rag on remakes and stuff, as long as they're done with complete respect to the originals, which Capcom eventually did re-release the original DuckTales, so I'm totally cool. Like, what they did with Wonder Boy, I would love to see more games have that done to them, because, like you said, it was all imagination. I mean, when I was a little kid, I used to bring the instruction manuals to school, and like that was my reading material when we had like reading time in kindergarten and whatnot. I was flipping through the Zelda instruction manual. God, I would love to see more people breathe that kind of life and show what their imaginations showed when they played the games as a kid. And
you know the part I loved about a remake like that, and DuckTales, it's just that there was nothing missing from the original.
Exactly.
Everything was there exactly in the same spot. All the houses were redone a certain way, but it was always exactly the way it was. It filled the gaps of our imagination, and then they added little personal touches, but nothing that felt too much or more than it should be, as well. And it was like, well, it's not the way I imagined it, but it's actually better.
Yeah.
That's how a remake should be done. Yeah, that was beautiful work, and the music as well.
I was just gonna say the music. I will say their interpretation of Sidecrawler Dance is so different from anything that I imagine. Like it removed the it kind of removed that part, and that. It's like I was angry and enthralled at the same time, because like I want to be angry because it's not the way I imagined it, but it's so freaking good. I can't be mad at it. It's just
I was the same. I was like, this is not the way I would have done it, but it's brilliant. It's really, really good.
But going back to Monster Boy, we're gonna get new remixes of. Does Monster Boy use a lot of the original Wonder Boy 3 music in it?
Yes, and new musics that feel very like they belong there as well. It's really, really well done by a few Japanese artists as well. It's sort of everything fits well together. I'm not just saying that because I'm in it or that's involvement with the team, but it all gels really well together. The musics are really, really well, beautiful musics. I probably would prefer that's personal actually, the music from the remake, if I was going to listen to something in my car, but they're really, really good music, and they're all a lot of the original tune that are remade, and as well longer, with variations and not just a loop. They've put a lot of effort and time. It's time to release it, guys.
Yeah. Don't get me wrong, work on it until it's done, but I'm getting a little anxious here. Come on, I'm ready. I'm so ready for this.
I know it's being released very soon.
But I do think that the timing of it is also really cool, because Wonder Boy the Dragon's Trap was so successful. Yeah. They can kind of bill it as like, here's a sequel. Like this this kind of comes after that, especially now that Sega is involved in it, right? They got their Sega's. I think,
so there's going to be, I think, from what I've read, I chatted to a few of the guys as well, but yeah, Sega is going to help with the physical release.
And they even put the Wonder Boy anniversary stamp on it, like.
Yeah, so I still don't know. I haven't heard. I tried to dig for information, but and I'm also under DNA, so. But about whether it'll have a Wonder Boy stamp or it's going to stay Monster Boy.
Oh yeah, it does. They it was in their news story about it. They showed a picture of the box art, and crap, I'm trying to find it. It's got that little stamp up in the corner that says, I'm looking for the image.
What I mean is the name is going to change to Wonder Boy.
Oh, it doesn't look like it because it says the picture that they put in this just says Monster Boy, and then it has Wonder Boy 30 years anniversary stamp on it. So, and I mean, really, I'd be fine with them just keeping it as Monster Boy, because if it's not confusing, then it's not Wonder Boy,
right? That's kind of the whole point of the series, I think. Now is to confuse the fuck out of people as much as possible.
Definitely.
Is Wonder Boy 3 the sequel, or is Wonder Boy 3 the sequel? There's two of them. All right, so let's see. We should probably...
When are we doing that episode, Chris? The explaining of all of that.
I did that on my Waveback episode. I took a few minutes and I kind of barked my way through the lineage of it, just being like, all right, so then this happened, and then this one, and it's I'll go back and listen to that from time to time, just be like, wow, that was confusing. So before we take a break, we have our whole other topic to talk about, but one of my favorite things you ever did was Mega Man Month. Are you going to be attacking Mega Man 3 anytime soon?
Well, I've a Mega Man cover coming next week.
Ooh, that's exciting.
Yeah, I'm going to work my way through all the Mega Mans, is the short answer, yes.
So you're going to go back and do some Mega Man 1 stuff?
Yeah, well, the one I'm doing next week is the Mega Man 1. And I'll probably just do a handful from that, because they're really hard tunes to work with and get something dynamic out of it. Like my covers typically are sort of, well, maybe not high octane, but the original tunes have a good drive to them. You know?
Yeah,
right.
It's really hard to do a slow tune, slow pace, for me.
And some of the Mega Man 1 music, I mean, particularly Bomb Man stage, isn't exactly a driving song. It's
when you listen to them on your own, you're actually it's really hard to picture a Mega Man actually. But it's only after when the 2 came out, they were like, okay, yeah, this is a high octane.
This is the
game.
standard.
Like,
here we go.
So Mega Man 3 after that, and then work my way through all the Mega Mans. Maybe revisit a few Mega Man on the Game Boy as well.
Oh yes.
Yeah, I think last time I was here, I said my list of tunes to cover was 3 years long. So now it's 3 years later, and it's 7 years long. So it's pretty safe bet to assume that any of the tunes you can think of is going to be in there at some point. I was listening to the previous podcast you had with Poop Poop Fart, who, by the way, is does a super job as well on his channel. Really, really tasty covers. But you're saying he's running out of ideas or material. Like, it's like, dude, it's so many good tunes you could work from,
That's really fascinating to me, because like he's going to be covering songs he doesn't know. So like I contributed to his I'm also a patron of his, so I started putting things on the his suggestion box. So I threw Pennsylvania from Balloon Kid, which I'm sure he's never heard that track before, but I'd love to hear him cover that one. Like I like the suggestion box idea, because it's going to be real interesting to hear his take on games he doesn't really have any experience with.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can't even imagine being in a situation like my co-host Matt with Waveback. We're like, all right, what are we going to do next? Boy, I don't know. I can't really think of anything. I'm like, well, Matt, I have a list of like 45 games just off the top of my head, so I got Waveback episodes covered forever.
Yeah, man. If I did this full time, I'd do 2 a week, easy. I mean, yeah. There's so many tunes in my head. It's a fucking mess up there. I'm not joking. I'm just looking at my list here. Yeah, it's if I do, it's one every 2 weeks at the moment, because that's really all I have time for. And it's 7 years long.
God
That's
damn.
awesome.
And
kind
I
of-
think last year I haven't even touched the list. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So pulling back to what we were just talking about with Mega Man, so you did a Mega Man 1 cover. Now, I assume you're basing it off the NES one. Have you played or listened to the Mega Man Powered Up soundtrack?
No, I have not. Not aware of it, actually.
It's a really fascinating PSP remake of the original Mega Man, and they it's a really fun game. You can actually I like, nobody bought it because it looks all chibi. The graphics are really weird. But,
It does look very, very strange.
It is weird looking, but it plays great. It's reimaginings of all the levels. You can actually play as the boss characters, the Robot Masters. If you beat the Robot Masters without using a special weapon, you can then bring them back to Dr. Light. He'll repair them, and you can play through a version of the game where Mega Man is one of the Robot Masters, and you play as like Bomb Man or something. And it's super hard, because imagine playing Mega Man, all the same levels, except you can only chuck bombs on an arc, you know?
Wow.
It's
God
really
damn it, Chris.
fascinating.
I have to add this one to my list now.
But the music reimaginings are really fascinating because
Yeah?
they kind of added a bit more high octane to all the tracks, but things like Gutsman stage and Cutman stage, they made them more like in a major key, and they're really interesting, really, really interesting. So I highly recommend seeking that out and at least, giving the tunes a listen, because it's pretty wild.
It's fun. It's one thing I've been wondering about actually doing at some point, is revisiting some of the tunes, but changing the key from major to minor. It can work in some tunes. I think a few YouTubers have done it already before, but I like the idea and trying to make them work like that. I like that. I'll have to check it out. Yeah.
Yeah, Gutsman stage reimagined in like more major key it takes on such a different life, and it sounds great. I mean, I love the original one too, but yeah, totally check out Powered Up. It's freaking rad.
Damn it.
All right, guys, we're going to take a quick break right here. When we come back, Ollie is going to talk to us a little bit about just what's going on with video game history outside of the U.S. You're listening to the Stone Age Gamer podcast from geekade.com. Stick around. And now here's a look at some of the other original content available right now at geekade.com.
Hey gang, it's Editor Evan, and this week I'm cutting the commercials, so let's see how well I can do an impersonation of Dan and Kris. First up, I'm Dan. I have an epic beard, I like beer, and wrestling is awesome. Other than that, did you know that we have a wrestling podcast? Geekade's very own Dean DeFalco resurrected my old, previously defunct wrestling show so he could talk about wrestling. Dean has teamed up with Ring the Bell's Matt Ramo for a semi-regular episode, and this week they talk about some WWE athletes that might need to be let go from the company. Be sure to tune in to my old show, Backdrops and Body Slams, Episode 4, Spring Cleaning 2018. Hi, I'm Kris. I love Nintendo, and I think video game music is the bee's knees. While this may only be the 16th episode of Nonstop Comic Shop, it actually marks the 75th comic book-related podcast Jordan has done. So to celebrate this kinda sorta milestone, he's taking a look back at the very worst comics he's ever reviewed. He'll also spend some time answering questions about microwave communication towers, Marvel's NYX's shocking similarities to Red Hood and the Outlaws, Reed Richards' questionable taste in heroism, and more. Don't miss Nonstop Comic Shop, Episode 16, Jordan's Top 20 Worst Comics, Part 1. Dan here again, Puzzle and Dragons. There's an all-new episode of Ring the Bell available now for you to view on Geekade's YouTube channel. If you're unfamiliar, Ring the Bell is the best wrestling show nobody watches. Except the last episode. You should probably avoid that one. But this episode is great. You should absolutely watch it. In fact, I should watch it too. So be like me, Dan Ryan, and watch Ring the Bell, Trouble is Brewing on Air, located on Geekade's YouTube channel. Kris here again. You can catch all this great stuff, plus tons of other articles, videos, podcasts, and more right now at geekade.com.
And we are back. It's me and Dan and Mr. Banjo Guy Ollie here. And Ollie and I were talking, geez, this was almost a year ago, wasn't it?
Yeah. We many times I think we mentioned it, yeah.
So
Long about 1987, we
yeah,
decided that...
way back when, before we knew each other. So Ollie and I were talking about some, I don't even remember what the conversation was about in the first place, but we got to talking about just how video game history seems to be getting skewed, and I thought that was a really interesting perspective. So I guess, Ollie, can you kind of tell us what's going on?
Yeah, I need to organize my thoughts about this, but it came about when I was listening to a French YouTuber talking about the reviewing a few NES games, and talking about his childhood and how important the NES was, you know, when he was a kid, and etc., etc. And then I started to think, okay, this dude is probably, I don't know, 5 years younger, maybe more, maybe a few more years younger than me, but I was like, no, the NES wasn't around when we were kids, so what on earth are you talking about? And because when I was a kid, I'd never heard of the NES. In fact, there was Master Systems around. You might see an odd ad for an NES in a magazine, but first, nobody gave a fuck, really. And then, because everybody had either a Master System or actual computers. You know, you had the home computers. The home computer market was just booming at the time. We didn't see that crash, that so-called crash in, was it 83 or something like that? Which, by the way, wasn't actually a crash. It was just Atari fucking up. But but that's all it was, you know, because even in the US, the home computer market actually did quite well. I think the C64 sold pretty well, and people shifted. So it was actually a crash of home consoles of companies called Atari. That's really what it was. So we didn't see that in
Mattel, jumped ship, and Coleco was like, yeah, computers are doing well. That didn't go well for them.
Yeah, but
it came down.
If you
to
look at it,
Atari.
like it lasted a couple of years. That's not quite a crash, and then it actually opened the door and allowed for fast recovery of other brands, you know. But anyway, so we didn't have that anyway in any form or shape in Europe, and then at the time it was all Sega. That was the big console that was out. It was only when the SNES started to arrive that people sort of took notice of the Nintendo brand. Now, I have a funny story. I remember the first time I saw an NES there was a shop in my in the town I was going to school. It was actually quite a decently sized town for France, I suppose. But the shop actually had an NES on display, and they had Super Mario. You could actually play it and all that. Now, at the time, I had an Amiga already. That's how late the NES came in. Like 16-bit computers were actually out by the time we had the NES, at least in France. In other parts of Europe, probably a bit earlier, but it was actually an aftermarket. It was released in Europe as a cheaper alternative to a Master System. So the Master System had been out for quite a few years before mass market NES products arrived. So I was watching this YouTuber mentioning his childhood with the NES, and I was like, there's no way you have childhood memories, these big childhood memories of the NES back then, because nobody had an NES. I didn't know anyone that had an NES, actually. There was a friend later on that had an SNES, and he actually imported it from Japan, or he got it at a shop to import it from Japan. So Nintendo wasn't present. So I don't know. I wasn't sure where it came from. And when I looked into it, I think what's been happening is that a lot of European YouTubers have used the early YouTubers from the US as models. There's been cases where scripts were literally ripped and translated from the Angry Video Game Nerd.
Really?
And translated it to French or German, or that's happened. By the way, it's actually not a problem, but there's a lot of French comedians that have been doing that as well with stuff from Seinfeld, and so it's not an unusual thing to happen. Because you translate material like that, it's already written, you just need to translate it, and suddenly nobody's going to search very deep. So there was a subset of YouTubers that were literally just ripping off scripts and translating them. So in translating them, obviously they're talking about all these childhood memories of somebody else, of events that never happened. But that stuck. They became very popular YouTubers. And now we have entire generations of kids that do believe that the NES Entertainment System was the biggest console in Europe, or in this case France at the time. And so it's really, really interesting. We're sort of rewritten history, despite the facts that are actually there. You just need to go on Wikipedia and just check the numbers. But I believe it's helped to some extent Nintendo get as big as it has, at least in Europe, creating a sort of false nostalgia that for a brand that wasn't there. I get it from the US. Wasn't it your main console, like the Atari and Nintendo? Like that was it.
Yeah, it's so strange to even I can't even imagine that. It's so strange because Nintendo was, at least specifically for me, it was so prolific. I mean, everybody had a Nintendo. We went to go see The Wizard in movie theaters, for crying out loud. I mean,
well, and it became the de facto way that we spoke about video games.
That's right. Yeah,
like a video game was a Nintendo game. Like, didn't matter if you were getting it for a TurboGrafx or a Genesis or whatever. You were getting a Nintendo game, much the same way that we, Tylenol has replaced aspirin, and
exactly. Are you playing your Nintendo again? Are you?
Yeah, like you would get Nintendo tapes, like, oh, he's up there playing his Nintendo, and like that was what parents would say. They'd say he's playing Nintendo. Like that word just replaced video games.
Yeah.
It was and that prolific. It's and thinking about what it. I have such a hard time wrapping my head around like how different that must have been if Master System was that thing, but it wasn't necessarily like. Would you say that Master System was as big as NES was here, or just that's what video games were?
It would have been as far as home consoles are concerned, it was definitely the Sega Master System. I knew nobody that had an NES. Nobody. And my parents were divorced, so I lived with my mother. I went to school there, went to few different schools there, and then whenever I'd go with my dad, I had a few friends. They all had computers. One of them had a Sega as well. And then we'd go on holidays with my dad on the boat and would sail around Brittany for July and August. That's all we did. So I would meet a lot of other families on their boat, and they had kids, and some of the kids had computers and video game systems, and nobody had an NES. I never heard anybody that had an NES. And the first time I saw one, like I said, I already had an Amiga by then. So it just wasn't there. Like, so whoever says it was, it's not true. Either you're thinking of the late release of the NES. So I do believe that some kids had an NES. That's not what I'm saying. But it wasn't. It was actually way, way after the NES was released, and it was released in Europe and in France in particular, and Germany, I think, as a sort of aftermarket, cheaper alternative for people who didn't want or have the money to buy 16-bit systems.
If you can have two of these, like
so, Sega would have been
Europe until 86 or 87, according to Wikipedia.
And that's when it hit, but it wasn't actually mass distributed until much later. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, even then, I mean, it hit 85 here in America, and just launched 83 in Japan, for crying out loud.
Yeah,
so I mean. It was already pretty old. Like, it's EU, I guess that means.
I remember because the first game I saw was Super Mario, and I was playing Turrican on the Amiga and all the awesome games, and it's going, what the fuck is this shit? Like, it's just, and then I got to play it, and it was actually fun. So I changed my opinion of it. But yeah, it was
visually speaking. If you're already playing Turrican and you look at Super Mario Brothers, like. That's not, for us playing, for me in particular, like playing Super Mario Brothers was like, I'm coming off of the Atari 2600, and Pitfall is my de facto. And now I see, the screen scrolling from right to left, and just the way it controls, and the controller's got 2 buttons on it. Like, that was humongous.
Yeah. But you were saying, like, was Sega our Nintendo in Europe? And I am actually... No, is the short answer. If you're talking exclusively about home consoles, yes, Sega was the Nintendo over here. But the biggest slice of the market and what most people had was home computers. So you'd have, like, I had the MSX, of very few people had, but it was I knew a good few people that had MSX. But there's the C64, the Amstrad was huge, the Spectrum. A lot of 8-bit systems, and then with the 16-bit system, it was the Amiga or the Atari ST. But that's what most people had. They had a computer, and because they came early on in Europe, most parents saw the Sega Master System or the Nintendo NES or the SNES and Mega Drive afterwards. They saw those as just gaming devices, so they weren't as willing to buy them for their kids. They would much rather buy a computer. Which they thought we could actually do homework with.
How wrong they were.
How wrong were they? But at least be productive in some way. I learned a lot of graphics, doing pixel art and music and all that kind of stuff, and programming, like from a computer. Obviously, stuff you couldn't do with a console. So that was my saving grace as well. And for a lot of kids, they could actually just dabble with new technology as opposed to just consuming it. So it was mostly home computers. So there's been a sort of a counterculture. I'd say about 3-4 years ago. People trying to bring Sega back and saying, no, Sega was the dominant force, which is not actually quite true either. It was actually home computers. But I think the problem is what you have is a lot of younger, people in their late 20s, early 30s, getting into the YouTube stuff, using the US YouTubers as their model, and using that history of video gaming, which isn't quite the same, in every part of the world, but using that as reference and filling the gaps of stuff they didn't experience, because if you're 40, you saw that happen, you were there, you've seen the first 8-bit computers arrive at home, and then the progress from there. If you're kind of in your 30s or thereabout, you might have missed some of it, by then. So I think that's what's happening in Europe. A lot of people are of younger generation probably filling the gaps of memories they don't have with stuff that they've seen US YouTubers do.
And do you know if anyone's...
It's an interesting topic, I think.
It is interesting too, and like, and I was just going to say too, I mean, like, we've talked about it here on the show before, and like Kris and I have done some stuff about Master System, but like when I was a kid, I had a Nintendo, and I never had an Atari. I went from Coleco to the Master System. I had a Master System first in the States here before I had a Nintendo, and like,
weirdo.
Right? Yeah, like I didn't know fucking literally anybody else that had a Master System. So I would talk about these games and my friends would be like, what in the bluest of hells are you talking about?
Yeah, I know.
What? You got a ship that turns into a robot? You got a fucking kid that's walking, like, what are you talking about? And it really wasn't like, I know at least within my group of friends, and like, my cousin had a Genesis, and he was like, dude, this thing came out, because I had blown up my because I was a fucking idiot, and like I had both consoles hooked up in my bedroom, and I would just switch the power cord, because my parents would never like buy me a power strip from because you're gonna burn the house down. It's like, fuck, I'm not, but whatever. So I could only have one power brick or AC adapter, and the Nintendo, the NES adapter was more powerful than the Genesis adapter, and eventually I blew up my Master System. Like, it just popped the chip inside, using that power cord. So my cousin was like, dude, there's a thing for the Genesis that will let you play Master System games. Like, holy shit, that's amazing. I need to I need to have one of these. But like, I used to come home and like Master System games had gotten incredibly cheap here when I was a kid, and like my mom, in an effort, and I think, like when I was a kid I was like, oh, she's being nice, but it was really just to shut me up. But whatever, I got games. Like, I used to come home and there would be like video games just like on the kitchen table, like, oh, you did good at school, whatever, here's a game. But they were like $5-10. I mean, they were so cheap because nobody had it, nobody played it,
and nobody wanted them.
Yeah, I knew two people
and nobody
with
wanted
Master
it.
Systems.
Dude,
I knew
try having an MSX as a kid. Nobody knew any of the games I had. I remember a Vampire Killer, which is Castlevania for the MSX.
Right.
So I was playing that before anybody heard of Castlevania, because it came out on the MSX sort of at the same time it was released, like a month difference. It was released on the Famicom disc system. And then it was released on cart, I think, and it's only a year after it was released on the NES. Mm-hmm. So I played Vampire Killer or Castlevania like a year before everybody else, which was awesome. But nobody, like, I was telling them, like, this game is amazing. They were like, the fuck are you talking about? Like, it was just fantastic game. And then I saw it. I remember seeing Castlevania. Which was very unusual for France. It was on the ferry port. I was going to England. My mother had friends in England, so she'd send me there every summer for 2 weeks, so I could learn English and just change of scenery. But so I was waiting for the ferry, and they had what I assume now was one of those Nintendo dual whatever
Versus
it's called,
systems?
Versus something like that. And it had suddenly, there's Simon Bellman there. I know who he is because I've played this guy like countless times, like about a year ago already, in weird colors, and the title is Castlevania. That's just so lame. There's no mention of a vampire or anything like that. Why would you call it that? It's like, that'll never work.
It is. Vampire Killer is such a cooler name. Like, I love the name Castlevania because it's what we grew up on, but Vampire Killer, like, full stop, is way better. It's just a much better. God damn it, America!
I like Castlevania. It's kind of cool. It's got, Castle. No, it's cool. I like Castlevania. Vampire Killer is the right amount of badass and tacky and bad taste. I love it.
Yeah.
So I'm curious. Another thing that it affects video game history here is that there's a lot of people who have written books on the subject of American video game history and how things rolled. Is there do you know of any good books that are written on European game history that really kind of focuses on these things that like what you're talking about?
There's a company called Pix and Love, yeah.
Yeah, they've done some good books. That's true. I've only ever read their Nintendo stuff though. Like they did the history of the Game & Watches and stuff.
Yeah. I don't read don't so much read literature actually, so I'm not too aware of any books that were written on the history, but the little I've seen, or even articles, or just focus on the sort of global history. So it's very factual in the sense that it'll tell you this was a success worldwide, or it was adopted here and there, but there's nothing specific. I think the interesting part of video gaming history and the important part is how it relates to a specific country, how it fits into the times, how it fits into the needs of the time. So when it becomes factually about this company, Capcom released Mega Man in blah blah blah, and they sold so many units, and this is the inspiration. You can see the art and early art and that kind of stuff. It's very interesting. But what I want to hear is the stories, like how was it? What companies actually distributed the systems or the games in Europe, or how did it come about? Like Philips is very interesting. Like the how why did they think the MSX would actually work in the first place? Well, the fact that they decided to be the company for Europe to manufacture the MSX and the stuff like that. I'd
Philips did the MSX?
Yeah. Philips did the MSX in Europe. Yeah. It was for ages. It was the only MSX available. It's a Dutch company, so it sort of spread out from Holland and Belgium and north of France, and then sort of trickled down to south of France, and then Spain had a big MSX following as well. A lot of the homebrew crews are Spanish crews, and they do some really really cool new games actually. So yeah, it's just interesting to see, like, there's nobody actually, I'm not sure anybody actually did a book on the history of the MSX in Europe. There was a guy that was planning on doing something like that, and I don't know what happened to that. That was like 3 years ago, so.
I would love to read some sort of account of that, because you've got those kind of personal account books, here in America, of just like, well, this is what it was like growing up with these things, and this is why this was successful here. This is why Atari failed here. This is why Nintendo made it into stores. How the stories of how they included the Rob the Robot in America so that they could slip into the toy department and be like, oh no, it's not a video game. It's a toy that has a video game attached. And then that was like their Trojan horse of getting video games are cool. So now we're, bye robot. Fascinating stuff like that. I would love to read a book about those kinds of stories in Europe, because, like you said, there was no Crash in Europe. It was just such a different experience. And the fact that people in Europe were playing Castlevania before we were, and a different version of it too, like a fascinating version with backtracking and stuff. Like, there's so many weird, and geez, I just remember growing up and always hearing about how it was bad for us in America, because we'd be like, we got this Zelda game like a year late, and then somebody would be piping in and being like, yeah, well, Europe's not going to get it for another year after that. So that big difference in time of like when everyone got to play these games that are now just regarded as these tentpole classics, like things like even A Link to the Past. And I want to know the cultural impact of those in Europe, because I think it's fascinating to hear, because you always hear those stories of like when games came out in Japan and how big they were, and it's well documented, that stuff in America, but I don't hear a lot about the stuff in Europe, and I don't know if anyone's really written about it. I know it's touched on in books like Leonard Herman's Phoenix. It's a great book, but it's less of a personal account. It's a very, very factual historical book, and it's awesome. It's fascinating. It's freaking huge, but the personal accounts from a European's perspective, I'd like to see more of. There's a book called Replay by Tristan Donovan that I think might be more on European history, but
I think that touches on it a little bit. But what I'm hearing, Kris, is that we need to start a GoFundMe to help me get back in touch with the family that I have in Holland, because I have like cousins and stuff that I've never met there, and then they can sponsor me to go over there, and then I'll write the book.
They're sold.
Done. I love this idea.
Tiff will watch the kids.
They have amazing beer there as well.
Right, they have amazing beer there. Like, I need to go to Belgium. This is a thing that needs to happen in my life. Mikkeler is very close to there. Omnipolo is out there. Like, there's so much. I need to reclaim my roots. I need to get back to Spain and Holland. Is really what needs to happen at this point.
Very cool. Do it.
It's gonna happen one of these days. But it is such an interesting thing, like just comparatively speaking here, because kind of like you're saying, in the States, like once the Super Nintendo and whatnot hit, like I think, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Kris, but like you knew a lot of people, and I think I knew a lot of people who had a Super Nintendo and a Genesis, and then they got a PlayStation and an N64, right? Like people had a lot of consoles, like, and now we have, in our houses, we have fucking 15, 16 different consoles going back and collecting all this stuff. And like, but even when we were kids, like we knew the market was just so huge for video games around here. And like, it sounds like what you're saying, Ollie, is that in Europe, it was like, no, this is what you had. And then fuck you, we didn't have the other one. Like this was just it.
I had one friend.
Sorry.
No, I had one friend that had an Super Nintendo and a Mega Drive. And I remember always looking in and going, make up your mind. Do you know?
Make up your mind, Mr. Fancy Pants. God damn.
Yeah, you can't have both. Like, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, I didn't know a lot of people with both either, because I mean that was where the playground arguments came from, you know, like there were two different tables that I remember in lunch. There was a table of kids that were all talking about playing Final Fantasy 3 on their Super Nintendos, and there was the other table that was the Genesis kids, and like, or that was the thing. It was, you had one or the other, and that was where that fierce brand loyalty, you know, I guess kind of stemmed from.
I mean, I suppose that's right. I don't know. I knew a lot of people.
No, you don't mix coffee and soup. You know what I mean? It's
I mean, maybe you do. God. Have you tried? I mean, coffee and beer works, so...
God, just imagine eating noodles out of coffee broth. Oh, God.
There you go.
I don't know. I'm into it. I'm into the idea. I'll give it a shot. I don't know, but, like, I also... I don't know. I like, for me personally, just hearing about this stuff is just kind of interesting, too, because I was always, like, that weird kid that I had the Master System first, and I had the TurboGrafx, and it was like, no, this is awesome. The fuck are you guys playing? Like, and I had the Super Nintendo and the other shit too, but it was like, there's this other thing as
Nintendo became popular in Europe. I think it started with the N64, but I knew very few people that had an N64. It was mostly PlayStation. But I think with the GameCube, that's when Nintendo really got popular in Europe. The GameCube and then the Wii, obviously. But it's interesting, it took that late for the brand to be established. And then suddenly, with YouTube, in retrospect, become this kind of huge, I don't know, a player in the market, which they weren't. I mean, there was Nintendo or stuff around, but not to that extent. It's very, very interesting. And some people might think it's trivial, but I think it calls to the way we process information and history in general. We have a tendency not to be factual about it and to rely on other sources for what we attribute as facts. It's not as trivial as it might seem, you know.
It's a big piece of culture. I mean, the video game industry is mammoth, and I think that kind of, I think it's very important. I think anybody who thinks that the false nostalgia for Nintendo products in Europe is trivial is out of their mind. Because
what's interesting is we knew about Nintendo. We had the Game & Watch. That was what Nintendo was at the time. Game & Watch. That's all they were.
It was this little toy thing that. Well, and it's interesting too because like the MSX like never really took hold here. Like that was just not a thing.
Were not really
home computers were just not like. I mean, we had them. But, you know, we played Oregon Trail on it at school or like some Math Blaster game and then went home and played our consoles. Like it was just very, very different.
Computer games didn't really start really taking off, at least to my mind, until you got stuff like, you know, Ultima 6 and Monkey Island, Doom.
Well, and stuff like King's Quest and what, like, cause, you know, I remember as a kid playing through, you know, like I played King's Quest a lot and was terrible at it, but still really loved it. And then had this other game called Bushido, and I was like 6, and it was just this little fighting game. But I would play it. I had a computer in my bedroom, and would go through that. But for the most part, it wasn't like, oh, come over to my house and play Zork. You know, like these things existed, but certainly not to the level
like more
of popularity.
Of a novelty. You know, they weren't like, you know, video games. If you were playing video games, you were playing on consoles, or if you were insane, you were playing on a Neo Geo. But
no, those were the super cool kids.
Yeah, those were the super cool.
I was never
kids.
that cool.
But yeah, computer games were really much more of a novelty. It seemed, at least from my perspective, when none of my friends were into PC games until I was. I mean, it was around the Super Nintendo era, and even a little bit later when, and obviously PC games always looked a little bit more advanced. Like I remember playing Super Nintendo games and being like super impressed by them, and even afterwards. But listening to the music on, like, I had the CD-ROM version of The Secret of Monkey Island, and you know, video games, console games didn't look like that, and they certainly didn't sound like that. You know, not until PlayStation and. Yeah. So there was always that.
Not when you were playing Descent with the Gravity Kills soundtrack. You could pop into your CD player at home. It's amazing.
Yeah. But yeah, there was.
How cool was Descent the first time you played it?
Oh, it's still fucking cool. I love that game. That game blew me away the first. Like, oh, this is amazing, and the soundtrack was so cool.
I'll never forget the first time I saw Doom running on my PC. My dad came home with it. He got like a freeware version from someone at work, and he was like, "Hey, Kris, you got to check this out." I come in there, and it's just like, what is this? This is incredible. I had never seen anything move like that before. You know, I missed Wolfenstein entirely, so I'm watching Doom running around like just silky smooth first-person shooter, crazy over-the-top violence, and I was just, oh my God, this is amazing. You shouldn't be showing me this.
I think I
or
was
anything coming out of a PS1 even. I mean,
yeah,
because it was coming from that tiny little box and suddenly like it was just 3D stuff and wow. Mm-hmm. I remember the PS1 was huge shock for me.
Yeah,
and that was
that whole era.
That like Sony kind of took over at that point in Europe. Like the PS1 was the thing.
Yeah, but again, a lot of people had PCs, so the PS1 was a cheaper alternative if you wanted to play 3D games, but you couldn't afford the whole setup of a PC and a 3D card. It's actually the route I took. I couldn't afford a PC, so I bought a second-hand PS1, and I could at least play, Tekken and a few other 3D games, and what was it, Legacy of Kain and all these games, and Tomb Raider that I couldn't play on a PC. I just couldn't afford a PC.
That's so interesting too, because like could we even get, because like PC gaming, like I said, just wasn't on our radar. But like, could we even get Legacy of Kain in the original Tomb Raider on a PC here? I mean, I'm sure we could, but
I distinctly remember Tomb Raider 2 on PC, but I wouldn't even know where to look for them besides, Electronics Boutique had that whole PC game section in the back that I never went to.
I don't know. It was like StarCraft. I thought that was all they had. It was just like 700 copies of StarCraft and Ultima.
God, I remember working in Toys R Us with you, and there was like a whole PC game aisle, but it was like 90% The Sims.
No, we didn't have PC games. We had The Sims. That doesn't count. That's it. I don't think we had any other games.
Clearance copy of a Daikatana that sat there for like, it's $2. Come on, buy it. No,
somebody buy this fucking game. God damn it. Yeah,
how bad are you now? You didn't buy it then?
No. I remember us having The Sims, and that was about it. And like now, it's we joke all the time about like, oh, you have a PC, oh, you have an Xbox. But like that, it really has become that, like, minus Nintendo and Sony exclusives. Like, you can get anything on a PC now, but that certainly wasn't like There was branding in this country of like games for Windows, and that was like a big thing when that came out.
Yeah, I mean, like if we had our PC, like our original PC, for way longer than we should have. So like obviously we didn't stay up to date on all the newest and greatest games, but like I loved my Nintendo stuff more than anything in the world, but I would still sit in my parents' room and play Doom on the PC or The Incredible Machine, and those were games that you just couldn't get on consoles. And when a console got a port of a PC game, like when SimCity came to Super Nintendo, it was a big deal. It was like, this game was big on PC. Myst, or even later stuff like Quake. Quake finally hits home consoles, or Doom hits home consoles. And when I put Doom on Super Nintendo, you're like, why'd you do this? I mean, it's really impressive, but why did you do this?
I have this other thing that is like, it serves two purposes. Like, I look at porn and I play Doom on it. I don't bring your Doom over to my Nintendo. I don't need it.
I bought it. It was awesome. Actually, I didn't buy it. I rented it, and because I was such a huge Doom fan, and I was like, "Oh my God, Doom is on the Super Nintendo! How does this work?" And really, have you ever played Doom on Super Nintendo?
No.
It's
why?
You gotta see it, because it's
why
like,
would one do such a thing?
You mess around with it just for the cure. It's like playing Resident Evil 2 on N64. It's like, they did this. Like, this works. It's not great, but it functions. It's not as impressive to me when they put Doom on Game Boy Advance, because that was awesome. Because that was portable Doom. That was like, this is the first time I'm playing Doom on the toilet, and this is the best day of my life. Because it worked. Like, not great.
Well, that's what the Game Boy Advance was for, isn't it?
I didn't carry that thing around. I didn't take that thing out of the house. It was my bathroom playing.
Right. What am I going to do? Go outside and play Golden Sun? No. Ugh. That sounds dumb.
Yeah, we have one specifically for the bathroom here.
Right? You bought a second one. This is the bathroom Game Boy Advance.
Yeah. But actually, the Resident Evil for the N64 is pretty impressive. Because it's
crazy. It's both discs
it's
on a
good.
cartridge.
It's good. I don't think much of the N64, but it's actually one of the, I think, best titles for it. I mean, it's good. It's actually good.
It's astonishing. The cutscenes, like they got FMV rolling on this N64 cartridge. It's condensed as hell, but it's functional. It's amazing. It's such a crazy exercise, and I can't believe you did this, but it's pretty wild. So, how did Game Boy and Game Gear do over there?
I had a Game Boy at the time. Yeah, no, they did okay. My brother had a Game Gear actually. How did they do? I haven't followed that much, but no, they were around. They were around.
Like your friends had stuff. I mean, like
I had another friend that had a Game Boy.
But,
Yeah, I had another friend that had a Game Boy, and I think I had two that had a Game Gear. But they came out late again, and they were sort of quite affordable. Yeah, I don't have huge memories of the game. I just remember having one and playing. I was playing it was a Gargoyle's Quest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
some
Gargoyle's
Gargoyle game.
Yep, that was the first one. That was Gargoyle's Quest. Yeah,
I had that, and I had obviously Tetris and Super Mario Land, and then I had just the Link's Awakening, and that was the first Zelda game I ever played.
Link's Awakening is so good too. That's a really cool entry into that series.
I was going to say, what a beautiful introduction to the Zelda world, which is not, not all of it is my cup of tea, but that was a very nice introduction, very pleasant game.
It was very much best of both
soundtrack
worlds.
as well.
Yeah, really, really good soundtrack.
Beautiful. Yeah.
And you could go in either direction from there. Like if you played Link's Awakening, you could definitely go back to the original Zelda and see where it came from, and then you could also go back to A Link to the Past and see what it was a scaled down version of. And it's
interestingly, the original Zelda is a very, very hard game to get into if you haven't played, or if you have played any other Zelda, especially if you've played the Link's Awakening or Link to the Past or any of these 2D Zeldas. The first one, I think you have to have played it at the time to really enjoy it,
appreciate
it. Yeah.
Well, and I think that goes back like that. I think what we were talking about earlier is like one of those games that is a prime example of, the first time playing through the original Legend of Zelda, it was like, this is the most massive world that I can possibly imagine, and it would be a bite-sized download on a phone now. Like, it's really not all that big. But when I was a kid, man, it was huge. And this story, and like you said, now the imagination isn't as necessary a component of it. So yeah, like if your first game, like my kids got gift cards from a friend to go to Best Buy, and they're thinking about what games do you guys want to go get for your Switch? And like, Sonic Forces, and my daughter asked if Twilight Princess was out on the Switch because she wants to be Wolf Link. Like, she doesn't care about the rest of it; she just wants to get to that part. And thinking about like if your first experience with Zelda was Twilight Princess, and then you're like, all right, well, let me see where this original came from. Like, what the fuck is that? You kidding? Some old horse shit right there.
Kind of hard to see the through line there. But again, I guess it all kind of comes to, that's really interesting because it's so different per perspective. John, his first, when he was like cognizant enough to recognize things, the first, game that he was really interested in, not, putting his hands on and playing with me, but watching me play and being enthralled with watching was Wind Waker. And the second one, like he wasn't, I was like, all right, well, let's mess around and see what else he's into. He got bored by Ocarina of Time, I guess because he didn't like the way it looked, because it's an N64 game, and N64 games are ugly as sin.
No one likes the way it looks.
But, we did A Link to the Past, and he was okay with Link to the Past, but the next one he loved was the first one. he absolutely loved watching me play through the first one and looking at the maps and figuring out the rooms, and he was so into it. You know,
yeah, but he was watching somebody who knew what they were doing.
Yeah, he was watching me do it and kind of figuring out like where to go. He was helping direct me and be like, all right, which way do you want to go now? And you could go this way and that way.
Because if you haven't never played the first Zelda and you start on your own with the knowledge and experience of all these games nowadays, you're going,
the inability to move diagonally is like...
Well, yeah, and where do I go? What do I do now? What's going on? You know, it's your... I get it was actually the appeal of the game back then. It's just in retrospect, it's a very hard game to get into. I've tried it with a few kids to show them the original Zelda. You just give them the controller and they're going, what is this? You know,
what am I supposed to do?
This is done. I don't want to do this.
But like that was
which actually partly links back to what we were saying earlier on, which how do kids and their imagination work? And that's actually a game where I couldn't get them to use their imagination or sort of free will to start exploring and going around. I think they wanted to be guided. Very interesting. I get why it would be an enjoyable experience to watch somebody go through the adventure that is the original Zelda, and but to do it on your own if you haven't experienced these type of games, I think it's a big ask actually.
The lack of direction. I mean, you know, I remember being a kid with the original Metroid and using graph paper to draw the maps, so I could figure out where I'm going. And it's not really a thing anymore. Graphs.
No.
I think
I didn't tire maps. I'd the paper with squares taped together for a few games. And Ishar was one of them, and I had stacks of them, like sheets of like 5 or 6 in a row. You know, big squares like that. Just taped together, and I would slide them from under my bed whenever I played the game, so I'd have an idea of the maps of the world and all that. Especially on the Amiga, there was loads of Dungeons & Dragons type of games, you know, that you couldn't do without a map, and didn't have a map in game, you know, for some of the dungeons or anything like that. Like, so how many of these I had, I don't know. Like there was stacks of about 10 or 15, just giant taped up maps.
You know, we also had Nintendo Power too, which was a big thing. You know,
yeah, I was going to say, how many guides were there as well on Zelda to help you navigate your way through the world?
Yeah, my neighbor Jeff had he had a subscription to Nintendo Power, so when it was time to figure out Zelda, like, you know, I'm looking at my maps that I drew, and I'm not super artistic, so my maps were always like funky looking, and I couldn't remember what certain symbols meant. And then I'd see his Nintendo Power that has all the screens of the dungeons lined up with each other, like this is what each room looks like. This is what, and I was like, oh my god! So totally different gaming culture. It's pretty wild to think about.
I think we've hit on it though. The original Zelda is terrible. That's what we
didn't say that.
That's what we've come down to, right?
Absolutely not. That game's amazing. Love that game.
A piece of shit that game is.
How are you two friends? It's Nintendo and Sega on one side.
Opposites attract. He's a really good looking guy. What can I say?
It's the beard.
It's the beard. He is
real men have beards.
Inspiration.
That is you know, it's just a fact.
All right. Well, this has been awesome. We've been going for quite a while. We should probably start wrapping things up here. Do you have any final words, Ollie, that you want to leave us with?
Chair.
It's a good one.
Damn good word.
No, I don't know, lads. Thank you very much. It's been way too long. We got to start planning for the next 3 years when we do this again.
That's really, I mean, let's start taking notes for the next couple of topics we want to talk about.
Yeah, we'll make it happen again. Well, you know, it was so much harder before. I have a house now. I can hide in the basement and the kids can be upstairs. My old one had to plan for Karen to actually leave the house. I didn't even record in my house, I think, when we... No, I did. I was in our house. My Karen went out with the kids so that I could record because we had this tiny little apartment. So it's more.
Yeah, I was up in Staten Island the last time we recorded. I took a day off of work so that we could do it.
That's right. Yeah, I couldn't do this. I had to do this in the middle. Well, like now actually. Wasn't that around the same time we did this?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was in March. It was raining. I remember that. Yeah. I was asking you what the weather was, and you said miserable.
That means nothing and everything here. Yeah, but yeah, and I have a good internet connection now. So as of a few months ago, so I can stream an online game in HD and watch Netflix and download stuff all at the same time now.
That's awesome. We don't have that.
Awesome.
Fuck.
Yeah.
I went from 1 meg to 100, so yeah.
We're getting shafted over here, Kris.
You are?
No,
Yeah.
we are.
Oh, we
in
are.
General.
Well, yeah, Comcast.
Yeah, just saying.
I hate Comcast. That's pretty much. If I was ever going to get a tattoo, it would be that.
When you got hit by that internet neutrality thing as well recently, didn't you?
It's hard to tell if there's a difference because it was shitty before too. So.
Yeah, I was going to say, has that changed anything, or was it a storm in a teacup? Or
Well,
yeah.
What's interesting about it here is that, like, the federal government changed the laws, and then certain states, like Kris and I happen to live in New Jersey, which is a relatively progressive and forward-thinking state. So our state government went, no, fuck you. We're just going to keep doing that anyway. So it's something that, thankfully won't affect us nearly as much as other parts around the country where their local governments are like, yeah, that's fine, whatever. That guy said it's a good idea. It's a weird place. This country.
So can state law sort of overrule federal law then, or
in certain aspects,
sure.
yes.
Okay.
In certain things, yes, it can, and in other things, like, we just got a new governor here in New Jersey, and this guy Phil Murphy. One of the things that he campaigned on was making marijuana usage, both medically and recreationally, legal in New Jersey. Now, it is still illegal federally, but the kind of thought there is that if it is decriminalized in New Jersey, is the federal government going to spend money and resources sending people here to fight something that would then go into the courts, that New Jersey would then fight the federal? Like, they're just not going to, so like, it does supersede it to a point, but it's fucking weird. It's just odd. It's a very strange place we live in, Ollie.
I love going to America, though. You guys have you've the best and the worst, of everything. But
we absolutely do.
Yeah. You've a fascinating country. I've been there over there about 7 times now at this stage.
When's the next time you're coming back? Are you doing a retro world again or anything?
Yeah. So there's been some change in retroware as well. So I think they're being moved to Screenwave Media or something like that.
Yeah, I noticed
very soon.
Your last video.
So I don't know if Retro World. I don't know if Retro World Expo is going to continue on. But I don't know. I don't know when. I'd love to see Canada, but I've never been to Canada. I've been to the US, and I've lived in the US for a short while, but I've never been to Canada. So I'd love to see some of that. So maybe that's our next big trip next time. But I have so many friends in California. That's usually where I go. Last 2 years we went to the East Coast because after 5 times over, it was time I saw something else than California. But yeah. I don't know. I don't know when next time is. It all costs money, so
Yeah, that's true.
Whenever
it all falls down.
Whenever we have a bit of money, or if there's a big conference that wants to invite me, all expenses paid for about a month, I'd go.
There you go. That. I keep hoping somebody's going to invite us over to Europe.
Yeah.
So far, it is not looking great. I gotta be honest. So far, the offers are non-existent. However, we're fun.
We're fun. We're gonna get to commentate free comic book days. That we're doing commentary for a tournament at Free Comic Book Day for our local mall over here. That's gonna be awesome.
I've seen a few videos of you guys doing a podcast live, or a few episodes live or something like that. It's usually fun. I'd say you have nice panels whenever you go to a con.
We really are wonderful. I mean, you're not wrong, Ollie. We are
No, like fun, and it's usually entertaining. Like, I like that. But yeah. Otherwise, the next time I don't know. Until then, I'll keep plowing with the channel and continue to grow it, and we'll see what happens. I started doing as well. Sort of, it's not podcast, but I switched on the camera and I start answering questions live on YouTube. These have been fun, actually. I thoroughly enjoy these.
Yeah, I always miss those.
It sort of happened by accident. I got a new, with my new connection, I got a new webcam, and I was just testing it on whatever software it is, and because I wanted to see if I could stream on Twitch, and next thing I know, it's on, and I'm testing stuff with YouTube, so you have to put whatever, copy and paste numbers here and there, and next thing I was live on YouTube and people were asking questions like, oh, okay, well,
this is happening.
Yeah, this is live. Okay, fair enough. So I'll answer these for 5 minutes and then we'll call it a day, because I wasn't planning. And next thing it was like an hour and I was still talking, and so I've been doing a few more of these. Yeah, they've been fun. It's cool to talk to people, like, just people from Russia and Israel and all these mad places. It's kind of cool. There you go.
All right. All right, well, I'm going to call it here and say that's our show. Ollie, it has been an extraordinary pleasure talking to you as always. Join us next week as things return to relative normalcy with the return of the 10-20-30. Dan and I will be talking about games that came out in February of 2008, 1998, and 1988, including games like Contra for the NES, Gex Enter the Gecko for PlayStation, and Lost Planet for PlayStation 3. Once again, I didn't say they were all good games.
No, but they are indeed games.
They are indeed games that existed and spoofed James Bond. Once again, you can get in touch with us at mail@geekade.com, as well as all flavors of social media that we inhabit. You can like us on Facebook, find us on Instagram at Geekade, subscribe to our YouTube and Twitch channels for all our latest video content, and follow us on Twitter at @the_Geekade. You can also find us individually on Twitter. I'm at Geekade Kris, that's Geekade Kris. Dan is at
Geekade Dan.
And Ollie, are you on Twitter?
I am.
How can we find you on Twitter?
I'm not going to tell you where I am, but
Banjo Guy Ollie.
At Banjo Guy Ollie.
Yeah.
All right. If you're interested in more information about anything we discussed here tonight, except the local government talk, because I'm not linking anything there, be sure to check out our show notes. No, it was fascinating. I don't know where to put links to that in. So, while you're at it, you can also subscribe to this, and there are other wonderful podcasts on iTunes or Stitcher, where if you're super nice, you can leave us a review, because any and all feedback is welcome and appreciated. We'd also like to thank our intrepid editor, Evan, for making this show listenable for all you folks. And we'd also like to thank Mark TDK Knight for our show's theme. You can check him out on SoundCloud and Bandcamp, or his website, which we have a link to in the show notes. Again, always remember to keep your eyes on geekade.com for even more fresh original content. So, Ollie, give your plugs. Plug your channel, your whatever, everything.
Yeah, Banjo Guy Ollie on YouTube, and I have a Patreon as well account if you want to help the channel, and social media. There's Banjo Guy Ollie everywhere.
Yes.
There you go.
There you go. I highly recommend it. Ollie's been one of my favorite YouTubers for as long as I've known about him. So
thank you, man.
And his stuff just keeps getting better. Like, seriously, listen to his original cover of Castlevania, the Vampire Killer, and then listen to the newer one. And there's a perfect example of how far he's come. So that's it, everybody. Thank you again for joining us, and keep playing games.
Bye.
Podcast over.
Yay.